Hi, I'm Mike Haduck, and I get a lot of questions about going into business. So I wrote them all down, and these are the things I'm going to answer and talk about. How I got started in a business, finding a niche, how do I get started if I was going to do it, should I go solo or S-chapter, should I deal with partners and expenses or renting equipment, should I keep a regular job and do it on the side, should I hire employees, dealing with inspectors, code officials, licensing, and permits. 3 rules dealing with these kind of people. Should you continue your education? The legal stuff, all the legal stuff involved. Insurance and lawsuits. Should you work for the union? The masonry business is changing. I did a video on that. Going with the flow, avoiding confrontation, politics and policy, an overview, and then I'm going to talk about what to expect from my channel in the future. So I hope you enjoy it. Here we go with how did I get started. So how did I get in the masonry business? Well, I was born in the masonry business. I was born in the early 50s. This is a picture of me in the 60s mixing cement. That was my dad's truck. And I remember going in that truck to the quarries and delivering stuff on the sites. But I didn't always stick in masonry because you couldn't. It was a summertime trade. I put on roofs. I did plumbing. I worked as a car mechanic. I did electrician work. I had apartment buildings. I flipped houses. I had my real estate license. One time I was in the nut business with my uncle out in Jersey. We used to go. I always kept trying different things. And whatever paid off and whatever worked. I was in the music business. You see my videos. I toured Europe and I did the Great Wall of China. I played the banjo and fiddle and the guitar, and we'd play in the Poconos and ski season all winter, and sometimes on the beaches on the weekends in the summer. I always had a lot of different things. I didn't stay into one thing. I was actually going to school to be a lawyer too, which really helped me out a lot, and I'm going to talk about that as we go. But that's how I got into business. Finding a niche. When you're in business, you want to get into something that not many people are in or not many people can do because you don't want a lot of competition. Now back in the 60s, my dad had a niche in building block foundations. The builders and the carpenters would actually put the footers in. We would go square it the day before, then they delivered a block. Everything was ready to go. Sometimes we put a foundation in one day, and that's including the steel beam and everything in those box houses. Sometimes it'd take 4 or 5 days to build a big foundation for a big house. But he had a niche doing that, and he also had the concrete work and the brick work or the stone work or whatever went with that. Now, he said to me, I remember 1972, he said, Mike, he said, I got a good business going on here. He said, I was 17 years old. He said, you could build your own house, you could drive a new car every year, and you could work all winter. When I heard that, I went down to the recruiting office and joined the Navy because me and my cousin, we must have moved enough block to build the pyramids. I wanted out of there. And when I joined, Vietnam was still going on. It was winding down, and the Middle East broke out, the war in 73. So I was up in the Mediterranean, then up in the Persian Gulf after that. But you have to get into a niche, and you got to look for something that someone else is not really into and you really do well and it's profitable. So how do I go in business? Do I start a partnership? Do I go sub-chapter? Do I do this or do that? Unless you're opening a storefront, you know, and you're selling music equipment or you're selling computers or you're, you know, got a deli going. For the masonry business, you really don't have to do anything. Now, if you just went out and you just fixed some old lady steps and you made 150 bucks here, and then you went over there and you did some plaster on the wall for painting, nobody's going to bother you. At least I know they'll try, but nobody's really going to bother you. They really can't. So what you do is every time you get a payment, you get a check. and you make a copy of that check and you file it. And in one column you put everything you made, and then you take all your expenses, no matter what they are. In the other column you put all your expenses, and at the end of the year you go to your accountant, your first year, and she'll tell you what to do. Now in Pennsylvania they come up with all these new laws. Every year it's a new law, and they came out with this Attorney General's number. So if you make over $5,000 and you are working for residential customers, they want you to have an Attorney General's license, which is $50 for 2 years, and they also require you to have business insurance, and it has to be, I think, up to $500,000, and we're going to talk about insurance later. But that's the rules, and you can only take 1/3 of the money down, but that's after that $5,000. So you don't really need a lot to get started in business. You could just go around and do stuff. Now, a lot of lawyers won't go after anybody who doesn't have insurance. But if you're going to take a job, you look for a job that there's not a lot of liability in. If you're plastering the side of a wall or you're painting something, there's not a lot of liability in that. But if you're building a chimney, a masonry chimney, and a house catches on fire, guess what? Me personally, I always look for stuff that's easy to do and there's not a lot of liability in it. People go in subchapter, all you're doing is you're making the government a partner. And you're going to get inundated, and we're going to talk about that later, inundated with paperwork. Best thing is to do is start out small. Stay small and keep it all. So that's what I got to say about that. The government is not your friend. They're there to get money off you. They're not there to help you. Sometimes there are some government programs where they will give you certain jobs or something, but in that sense, but nope, keep things simple at the beginning. That's my advice. Now, going partners with someone or buying equipment or renting equipment. First of all, I never go partners with anybody. I might partner on a job. In other words, we had this big stucco job. It was only me and another guy. Well, I pulled in another company, and they helped me for the 3-4 days, and that worked out. Then we took another job, but we were never a partner in business. We're just a partner on that job. Now, I always worked with an excavator, so he would sometimes get jobs, and I would get jobs, and I would use him, and he would use me. It was a partnership like that, but we didn't pool our money together and pay taxes together and everything. We were both separate. Sometimes he would bid on a job, and then I'd get a check for what I did on his job. And the same thing, it's just like working for a builder. You know, he gives you a 1099 at the end of the year and good. Now when it comes to equipment, I have what I just need. I don't have like a Bobcat. Now my brother, he's different. He's constantly using it. He has a track hoe. He's using all that stuff once a week. But me, I might only use it 2 months out of the year. So why do I want to pay expenses and insurances? I'll just go down and rent it for what I need. Now sometimes you could rent the equipment with the option to buy. So if you rented a lull, say you were building this big wall, it was going to take you a year, you could rent the lull with the option to buy. So sometimes that works out, because after you rent it, you might rent it for 4 years, and all of a sudden you only owe $10,000 on it, and that was all bid in the job, and then you could sell it for $80,000. So you got all your money back. It's another way to make money. I see guys, and this is it's always typical, and I've seen this a lot of times. They do good. They go out and they get these few jobs and they do really good. They get a new dump truck, they get a new track hoe, they get a new Bobcat, they got all these expenses. Employees, we're going to get into that later, and then things turn south, or someone doesn't pay them, or something happens. Then 1-2 years down the road, they're bankrupt. Their stuff is up for auction. I don't like putting myself in positions. I'm very prudent and diligent. I watch where my money's going. And it's the same thing with you. Now some people expand their business and they'll be putting it into maybe real estate or securities or other businesses, but not everything at one time. You got to be real careful. You can always go down and you have a pickup truck. You don't have to buy a dump truck. You could buy a dump trailer. So you go down, you get the trailer, and you're only paying $8, $9 a year to register the thing, and you could always sell it and get your money back. You got to be really careful with your expenses. I watch a lot of guys go belly up, spending more than they make. Now here's a good question. Should I keep my regular job and just do this on the side, or should I go big and hire employees? Well, there's a real lot to say about this. I had a saying last time. It was, what's the definition of a successful contractor? Someone whose wife has a good job, because they got steady things like teachers or maybe nurses, or someone who works for the power company. Somebody who has a steady job, a steady income, they're going to get a pension. Because I see contractors work until they're 70, 80 years old and they still don't have anything. The expenses are killing them. I see a lot of teachers retired down in Florida, a lot of government people, stuff like that, and God bless them. I'm glad for them. But me, I was in a different situation. I was never married. I never had kids. I loved playing in bands. I only needed the money I need, and I worked for that. Now, a lot of guys in the construction business are under what they call the redneck retirement plan. They're getting lottery tickets. They don't have anything, and they're going to end up with nothing. And you get old fast. Like, I'm 68, and I'll tell you what, you get old fast. You wouldn't believe how fast it goes. I'm going to talk about getting employees and going big. I see guys get employees and go big, and God bless them. They love it, and I'm glad for them. But once you get employees, here's the people that in Pennsylvania I have to deal with if I got employees. Birkenheimer, they're the tax people for the local and the school district and all that. Then the IRS, the federal unemployment, the PA unemployment, the Social Security Office, the PA Department of Revenue, municipal tax, the right to work tax, Attorney General's license, business insurance, workman's compensation, Obamacare, inspection and inspection fees. Then you got third-class cities, the Bureau of Labor of Industry, permits, OSHA, DEP, EP, EPA, DOT, and it just goes on, and these people inundate you with paperwork. As time went on, our family, we just got rid of the employees, and I'll tell you more why as we went. And if you wonder why China does so good and we don't, there's too many laws, rules, and regulations. It's really hard to do business anymore. And the government gets bigger and bigger, and they keep squeezing business more and more. Personally, I think we're going to end up like Venezuela as they keep going, but it's hard to do business anymore. If you're going to keep a job, you know, keep a regular job like a government job, you know you're going to get a pension, you know you're going to get retirement, you know you're going to get health insurance. Here, when you're in a business, you eat what you kill. You know, you're not eating off someone else's plate, you're eating what you get. And if you get into a bad time where someone doesn't pay you, I seen a guy, you know, he was pretty big in the area, and then he went out to New York City and he got these big $1 million contracts, and then they didn't pay him. So then he had to get lawyers and everything. He went belly up, he lost everything. Sometimes it's good to just stay small and keep it all. You got to be real careful with your money when you're in business. And when you go in business, the government puts a big target on your back and everybody's after you. So that's a good warning. Now I'm going to talk about dealing with code officials, inspectors, permits, licensing, all that sort of thing. When I was young, best way to start out, there was none of that stuff. The lady next to me, they had an outhouse. There was chickens running through the yard. They had barns. They had this. They had the other thing. Nobody would come in and tell you what to do with your property. They're all World War I, World War II, Korean War veterans. You didn't go and tell another man what to do with his property. But all this stuff started coming in. And they started making more laws, more rules, and more regulations. And some of it, of course, is good, common sense. The cow kicked over the lantern and burned half of Chicago down because the houses are too close. San Francisco, what happened was the earthquake came and all the buildings fell down. So they have what they call building codes. You go to Miami, the hurricanes come true. So they want you to keep a minimum standard on how to build a house. What happened though is they gave these guys authority to tell you what to do. So do you trust these guys? No. I lost thousands of dollars. I got lied to, misdirected, delayed. All this stuff happens with these guys. I don't really go to towns I'm not sure of and work there. What I do is I only work the places I know. And if you'll see, I'll say Mike Haduck sometimes, Masonry and consultant. The only reason I put consultant in there is because they would come around and if they see your pickup truck, they'd write you a fine. And then they come out with all these new laws. Well, now it's the Attorney General's office. They have to accept it, but they don't. And what happened is the politics came into it. A lot of times they want to keep you out of that town from working because they want to keep their friends working. It's political. Also, if there's, let's say, the government gives them a big grant. Well, they don't want you in the town. They want someone else in there. So you got a couple different kind of people. You got God-fearing people, which I call them, and then you got your little Napoleons. A lot of times I will not go to a different town in a different state, and I would just stick to the area I know the people. So I'm going to come up with some rules that I hope you live by when you're dealing with these kind of people. First of all, in Pennsylvania, you have legal rights if you own your property. You have the right of possession, the right of control within the law, the right of enjoyment, the right of exclusion, the right of disposition to sell it or will it or whatever you want to do. That's your legal rights in Pennsylvania. Yet they'll come up and they'll say, oh, the only one that could get the permit is the contractor. Well, he don't own the property. It's your property. So what I do is, if they say that, I don't want to fight with them, I'll tell the owner, I will not go get a permit unless you're there and another witness. Let them tell him then, and then lets him see what's going on. So if there's any funny stuff going on behind the thing, I have a witness and the owner was with me. Number 2 rule, if you're going to deal with an inspector, make sure that he shows up on the job before you start the job. Make sure the owner's there and another witness. Now when I meet with the inspector, I'll have a list of questions for him and I'll have a draw out of what I'm going to do. And then I'll go through, how far do you want from the top plate? How thick do you want the footer? How many rods do you want in it? What's the height of the door from the bottom? I'll go over all these questions, and the last one is there anything you want me to do that I'm not sure of? And as he's doing it, I'll be writing the stuff down and he'll want a copy. So he'll say, give me the copy, this is the last guy, and sign it. So I signed the copy and I gave it to him. And I said, okay, here's my copy, you sign it. He's not going to sign that copy. Why? He don't want the liability. So before you do anything, make sure you meet with the inspector before you start the project and go through a list of everything he wants you to do. Make sure you're on the same page. Rule number 3, keep a logbook. Right here, I kept a logbook on a job I did, and everybody who showed up on that job, everybody who, when they came, when they left, when the deliveries were, who I was working for, everything. First thing, if you ever go to law school, they're going to teach you, keep a logbook. I'll tell you a story. I was out in Jersey. I go out with my brother once in a while, and this one house in the distance, big fence around it. And I heard that he told him he was building the city, get the permits. He said, if I get held up or you delay me or I have any trouble with you when you're all done, I'm going to sue you. So everybody that came in that gate, they had a guy in front of that gate, every phone call and everything. And at the end, he sued the city, the inspectors, everybody, and he won because he kept a logbook. So rule number 3, keep a logbook. Should I continue my education? Well, especially if you're a young guy, yeah. What happened with me was, because I was overseas and Vietnam was still going on, when I got back, they sent me to college. I'd go 2 days a week. They paid for all my books, all the tuition, all that stuff, and they were giving me $400 a month to go. So I'd go to college 2 days a week, and then I would work 3 days a week for either my dad or other builders or plumbers or whatever I was doing for extra money, and it helped. I wouldn't take stupid courses. I'd take engineering, I'd take architecture. Law is great, we're going to talk about that next. And I would, if I was going to stay in a construction business, I'd go get my inspection certificate. You know, I'd take all that stuff about the codes and OSHA and all that stuff, so nobody's trolling the wool over your eyes. It's going to be an advantage for you. Yes, I would continue my education. That don't hurt anything at all. Now I'm going to talk about law. It's one of my favorite things. When I went to college, you take courses like legal research. You learn how to search a deed. You learn how to write a court brief. You learn how to search a case. Bankruptcy law. You learn all the different things of bankruptcy. Real estate law. When I was in my real estate license, or when I had it, it helped me out tremendously. But one of the biggest things I enjoyed was civil rights. And I even wrote a book about civil rights, natural law, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, Civil Liberties, and the Ten Commandments. So I know there's not a lot of construction people that would know a lot about the rights, so I'm going to give you a crash course. So I'm going to make it real quick for you just to get you to know what I'm talking about. When you're a citizen of the United States and someone from the government becomes a government official, they got to take an oath. That means what they're doing is they're swearing to the Constitution to protect your rights. You're the principal, not them. They take the liability. When I complain, if I complain to someone and they made it hard on me, a public official, that's a violation of my First Amendment right. A lot of times I would complain. And usually if they didn't immediately remedy my complaint, they'd get a letter in the mail. The letter would just say, you know, very simple, what the complaint is about, the reason I'm complaining, and what I want for my remedy. Now, I even had a situation one time where a guy wouldn't give me to put the thing in writing, so I had to call the police. Couldn't believe I called the police, got a police report. This guy wouldn't give me in writing. I didn't do anything wrong, but if they're going to come around and tell me what to do, they got to take the liability. That's the way I look at it. You're gonna laugh at this one, but I got to a point, especially when it was my properties, I came out with the inspector code information sheet, and it was just something like, who are you, what's your insurance company's name, are you an architect, are you a registered engineer, what certificates do you got, how many years of experience, do you review all the plans, do you do this, do you keep a logbook, and then at the back the rights, you know. And I would give it to them. I'd never see them again. When those guys come around, like when I was in real estate, you'd get a consumer notice. And you give the people you're showing the house to a consumer notice. They know who was what was what. You don't get anything from regular inspector. If you go and get a bank inspector or a home inspector, say you're buying a home, and the inspector comes, he goes through the whole thing, you get a written report. I never got a written report with these local guys. I never got a satisfaction survey where I could write if they knew what they're doing. And I don't want to get mean on this, but the truth is, and one guy said it best, he said, the problem is they got a lot of foxes to watch the chickens, but nobody's watching the foxes. I've heard hearsay stuff, like when I was talking about that house where they put the gates around, I'd hear hearsay where they'd go in and they'd tell someone with an old house, oh, this is all going to be condemned, and they're going to throw you out of it, and then they get their buddies to buy the house for almost nothing. A lot of stuff like that goes on ever since. There's nobody watching these guys. I don't want to go on and on with this stuff, but don't let any official, inspectors, code officials, or whatever, everybody tell you that they're not liable. The Supreme Court ruled that all agents are responsible for the foreseeable consequences of their actions. That means if they tell you what to do, they're going to be liable. That's why you got to keep. I had a lot of them tell me to do some stupid things, and I refuse to do it. That's why I meet with them before the job even starts. So you got to do stuff to protect yourself. So let's talk about insurance and lawsuits. Back in the 60s, I remember you didn't need insurance to drive a car. You didn't have to have it. And I don't think that came in till maybe the late 60s or early 70s, where they required you to have insurance. Same thing with business. Nobody really had business insurance. As soon as the insurances came up, then guess what? All the lawsuits came up because lawyers go after insurance companies. Now when you go get insurance, they're going to ask you, okay, I'm getting an insurance policy for a masonry business. It's going to say, do you put footers in? Yep. Okay, you pay more insurance. Do you do chimneys? Oh, yep, you pay more insurance. Do you leave your scaffolds up overnight? Yep, you pay more insurance. And it keeps going and going and going. So a lot of times people call me up and say, well, I want you to do this. I say, well, I don't do that anymore. I don't build chimneys anymore. I don't put footers in anymore. I don't do all this stuff anymore. The lawyers go after the insurance companies. Now when it comes to lawsuits, I'll start out telling you a story. It just happened. Guy was working in one of these third-class cities, and you have to have a license to work there. He couldn't work there. He had to get a license of someone else that had a license to work in the town. It's all about the money. So he works in, he's working on the bottom floor or whatever it is, and on the top floor somebody got hurt. It didn't happen the day he was working there. It didn't happen on his floor. He never met the guy, but they filed a lawsuit against everybody, even the guy that lent him the license. So what does he do? He comes back and he files it in with his insurance company. But if he didn't have insurance, they probably wouldn't go after him, but they won't let you work there until you have insurance. So, and a lot of times these insurance companies, they don't want to pay anybody anyway, and sometimes even if you're not guilty, they'll pay it off as if you are guilty, because it's cheaper for them to pay it off than to go to trial. Sometimes people will get an umbrella policy, whatever they have, their whole, if you have a lot of assets, some of the big boys, they'll go get a big umbrella policy that covers everything, $1 million, $3 million. If everybody comes after you, you do that. Or you can go to Florida. A lawsuit can't take your house off you in Florida. I forget what the bankruptcy laws were, but something, I think Connecticut was $100,000 at the time when I was taking it. Now, was I ever in a lawsuit? No. I never sued anybody, and no one pulled me in individually. One time I had to go testify, and they named me in it. And what it was this guy was moving a trailer, and like I told you, when you're dealing with anybody, get it in writing. There's the dimensions, this is what happens. Well, the guy comes around the block with the trailer, and they hit the telephone pole and the curb, and it ripped all the plumbing off. Well, they put the trailer on top of the foundation according to his specifications. Well, the lady filed a lawsuit because he refused to fix it. And then what they did was they either named everybody or they sent you a summons. I got a summons in the mail, and I had to show up, and then they start questioning me. This and that and the other thing, and I said, well, the police was there. Where's the police report? I wasn't there, and here's what the guy wrote me, and that's what I did. I'm right to the letter. So you gotta watch, you gotta protect yourself all the time. He tried to get the guy who pulled him off. The guy came with the backhoe and pulled the trailer off, and he blamed him for it. So everybody had to get a lawyer. I didn't. I just went in, and I kind of knew what to say. One time my dad had to build a foundation for one of these houses that they come with the cranes and they drop the houses on. So they gave him the set of plans. He built the house to the set of plans. When they come to put the house on, it didn't fit. Why not? They gave my dad the wrong set of plans. And I remember the guy saying, let me see those plans. When Dad says, oh no, and he went and got a copy of it. And the guy had the plans signed, the company that gave him the plans. Well, luckily it did fit on, but the doorways were, out of jive, so he had to go and fix the doorways. You gotta watch what you're doing. When they started all this inspection stuff, back in 15 years ago, I was working on this real big stone house. I was almost done. One more day, right there I was working, right where the plans were. Well, now they got these inspectors coming around. The guy comes up, he's looking at the plans, he goes, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, I want you to do the other thing. And I stood up and I threw my hands up and said, wait a minute. When I went to law school, the guy that makes the plans is the guy who interprets it. If you want me to do something, you write on the plans what you want me to do and put your license number and your name and your contact number. Well, he looked at me and he looked at the plans, and he looked at me and he looked at the plans. He looked at me again. He said, "You're doing a good job," and he ran down the road. I've never seen the guy again. You got to know how to deal with these people, and you got to know what to say, and you got to protect yourself. Get everything in writing. If someone gives you a set of plans, make sure they sign and date it. Let's talk about joining a union. This is my union book from 1986, 1990. You know, they put it in here that you paid your dues and everything. Back in those days, my brother called me up and says, "You guys got to come out and here work. It's booming." And at that time, I think it was like $22 an hour, which was a lot of money in 86, 87. And you get overtime. So we went out and they put us right out. And when you work in the union, the thing is you get to work on the big like commercial buildings. I worked on skyscraper type of buildings, schools. I worked in warehouses. We were pouring concrete. You couldn't see at the end where the end of the building was. Hotels. I worked Embassy Suites. I remember I worked out there. Branchburg Mall up in Somerville. I did a lot of the stonework out there. The thing with the union is it's a great experience. You work with a lot of different guys who know a lot of different ways of doing things. It's very commercial. Like the thing is, it's very cyclical. It could be booming for 4 or 5 years. You know, they're pulling all the guys in. We need you, we need you, we need you. Then 5 years later, like boom, the bottom drops out. Everybody's sitting on the bench. And they're paying dues and they realize it's just not worth being in a union anymore. Now when you work there, you gotta get so many hours in towards your benefits. And then for every year you work or something, you get a little bit of a pension. It was good. It wasn't my style because I didn't really want a steady job. But it's a great experience. I know guys call me up and say, "Well, I was a commercial cement finisher and it should be done this way." Well, I worked with all those guys, you know, so I know right away how everybody does things a different way. Every company you work for out there does things a different way. But the union, yeah, it's a great experience, but you just can't depend on the economy. The economy determines how good they're going to do. I did a video called "The Masonry Business is Changing." No matter what business you get in, it's going to change. When I was a kid, my dad would be putting in cellar after cellar and foundation after foundation. Well, they don't do that anymore. They come and they dig the hole, they put the gravel down, they come in with the crane and they put the walls in, and then they'll come with the house already done and pre-inspected, and they come, they drop it on top of the house, and you're done. Everybody's trying to get away from the loops that you got to jump through. Same thing with me. When I do something, I did a mailbox, right? I built it at my house and I delivered it. A set of steps. When I build a set of steps, they're movable. Because same thing, when they have the concrete, you see they come in with those concrete steps and they drop them down on a pad. Same thing. Everything's movable. Even a fireplace I built, it's movable, an outside fireplace. You can take it with you when you sell the house. But everything's changing and it's going to keep changing. Brickwork is dying. Nobody does brickwork anymore. Everybody puts that fake stone on. We used to have to go to the quarries, you know, get it back and chip it all out, lay it all out, put the stone up. No more. You just take it out of the box and you stick it on. Everything's changing. When you have a business, if you're going to go in your own business, you got to keep reinventing yourself and keep looking to the future, because sure enough, things are going to change. Going with the flow, avoiding confrontation, politics and policy. This is a book. If you go take legal courses, you go down to legal library, at least back then, you go to Black's Legal Dictionary, this is a small version, and you look up the legal definition of a word. Expert, a person who through education or experience has developed skill or knowledge in a particular subject so that she may form an opinion that will assist the fact finder. Now if you go onto the internet, because you can go on the internet anymore and look up the words. License means permission to do something. especially formal permission from a government or other authority. The word often refers to the proof of that permission, such as a card or a certificate. Those who hold such license are to be licensed. So when you get a license, like some of these third-class cities, they want you to get a license to perform masonry work. Does that mean you're an expert? No, there's nothing in the license saying you have to be an expert. You have to do certain things. All they want is the money. And here's the point I'm trying to make. Back when I first started, you go back in time, no one would tell anybody else what to do. Yet no one was going to say you can't work. Now you have to have a license, you have to have a certificate, you have to have permission, you got to know this guy, you got to know that guy, you got to jump through hoops. That's why I was telling you, someone had to use someone else's license to work in their town. So what do? A lot of times, like I said before, I won't go and work in certain towns. You can't trust them. So they make these ordinances up, and then they'll have a policy. Like, okay, well, we just made a new ordinance, you can't burn garbage in that town. A month later, everybody's still burning garbage. Well, why ain't they giving everybody a ticket? Well, because the policy is we're not going to go after anybody until they complain. The only reason we had to make the ordinance is we had one guy that was burning garbage every day and the neighbor was complaining, so we had to make an ordinance. But nobody's pushing it. The policy is that as long as no one complains, who cares? And that's the way they keep making these laws, and they keep making these laws. And it keeps going. At the federal level, they couldn't get the mobsters, so they made the RICO laws. Now it gives them something to go after them for. Same thing with the terrorists. They made the Patriot Act. Now they got something to go after them for. So they keep making all this stuff up. And are they right? Well, yeah, most of the time they're right, because I did my complaints when they started all this stuff. I went down to just to see what they're going to say. Went down to district attorney's office and I complained. After the guy heard me, he said, why don't you just buy the guy a cup of coffee? He's right. Okay, I went down to the attorney general's office and complained. She said, no, we really don't want to get involved in that. You have to get your own lawyer. See, they don't want to get involved in the politics. I think I was on my way to Florida and I stopped at the Bureau of Labor of Industry. They wouldn't even let me in the door. And they, it's like they don't want to hear it. It's all politics. They want to let the politicians take care of it. And then it becomes a favor thing. So I'm going to tell you a little story. Back in the day, when I was growing up, it was the communists, it was the Iron Curtain, it was the Cold War. I was involved in a lot of that. So the communists are bad, the communists are this, the communists are the other thing. You're fighting for your country. So we're overseas, and part of our job was to spy on the Russians. We had a helicopter, we'd be flying over the sites. They didn't have, the big stuff they got today. And we were off the coast of Somalia on this island, and the Russians had an anchorage, and we snuck up on them. Ba-boom, they shoot over the bow of the ship. So we're there, we got the helmets on, we got the life preservers on, we got the guns pointing at them, they got the guns pointing at us, and we were in an incident. So years later, I worked with this guy from Russia, Peter his name was. I said, Peter, what's the difference between Russia and America? And he says, you want to smoke cigarettes in Russia, nobody cares. He says, if you want to drive an old car, no inspection, tires, nobody cares. He says, if you want to put an addition on your house, nobody cares. You want to have a party, nobody cares. He says, you could drink a gallon of whiskey, fall down in the middle of the road drunk. Nobody cares, but you can't say anything. He says, in America, you could say anything you want, but you can't do anything. And it's the truth. Every time you turn around, it's another law rule. I even got held by a foreign army. It was only like for a half hour until they came out of the bushes with the machine guns. I was going to go for the guy's machine gun. I didn't know what was going on. We were unarmed, and then when the motor whaleboat came to pick us up, they let us go. So every time I go into these places, I still get that feeling. So going with the flow and avoiding confrontation. Like I go down to the Attorney General's office, They're chasing guys who've stole money off of people. They wanted $5,000 down, then they took off and they never came back. You go down to a district attorney's office, they're chasing murderers and all that stuff. So you don't have feet that run to mischief. Sometimes you just got to go with the flow. You know it's political. I tell everybody before I even look at the job, do you know anybody on the council or the mayor? They could always call them up. I'm going to come down for a permit, or am I going to have a problem? A lot of it's political anymore. They're half right, they're half wrong. Maybe I'm babbling on, but I think you should know this kind of stuff and you know what to look for. I just avoid the confrontation. Certain towns I won't work at. I'll just do what I do, and a lot of times at this age I can't pick up anything heavy anyway. I can't take no big jobs. I did that concrete job last summer and I almost died. It was just too much for me. I'm too old now, 68. I've just taken like fixing little walls and stuff like that. But you should know how the business has evolved, and you should look to the future on the way it's going. These videos are all food for thought. That's what they are. You consider what I say and you glean what might work for you. So that's that. Well, I'm coming to the end, and I'm going to do an overview, a little quick overview, and then I'm going to tell you what my plans are in the future for my channel. Well, first of all, you don't need big equipment like I told you. I know people who have 2 or 3 trailers. They keep everything in there and the equipment. They don't have garages or nothing. Sometimes they just take the trailers on the job and leave them there. So that saves a big expense. Sometimes rent just what you need. Pick your jobs. Be careful what you're picking. You don't want to get in. I did that on how I bid a masonry job. I explained a lot there. You can go to that video. Yeah, I make friends. I have a lot of friends. I didn't do it early. My brother's a lot better at it than me. But if they have something going, they might include you. Or if you have something going, you might be able to include them. They might have a big job and need help for a couple weeks. I'd rather do that than have employees, trust me. Also, I just got a call. A guy said, oh man, they told me come and look at this job. And I said, I just looked at it. He says, I'm not taking it. And I told him all the reasons why I'm not taking it. And he said, oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, as long as I know, you know, but he's welcome to take it. So you just trade information. That doesn't hurt anything. You don't want to get into jobs where you have to wait 60 days for your money. A lot of stuff could happen in 60 days. I keep it simple. When I don't, like I said, I don't have employees. We got rid of them a long time ago. Not that we got rid of them, they went their own ways and we just never really hired anybody else. You can work with your brother. I could go down and work with my brother. I could work with other companies. I just sometimes just go help the owners or something like that. And then if someone calls me up and says, I'm going playing in Scandinavia, you want to play the banjo, or I did it and took off for a couple weeks in China, and then guys delivering a sailboat. I get on the sailboat and I'm gone for a month like that. I love the freedom of being in your own business. I'm a minimalist. If you walk into my house, there's nothing really there. The more stuff you got, the more stuff you got to keep paying on. So I keep it simple. You could always be a go-getter. Take the wife to work and go get her when she's done. But I keep things simple. I'm still old school. I still have an '89 truck with a carburetor and distributor in it. I see people go buy these $50,000, $60,000 trucks, then you got to pay on it and you got to keep working for it. I don't want to be a slave to the business. Now you're going to ask a question, Mike, would you ever go in the masonry trade again? I'm going to say it this way. I never met a rich mason. I never met a rich mason. Now when I was growing up, all these guys from the 30s and the 20s that were building the churches, and then in the 30s, right before World War II, the Depression, they were building all the stone walls. All those guys were still around in the 60s and the 70s up into the 80s. There was a ton of people in the masonry business, and you had to get into a niche, you know, to do anything. But I never met a rich mason. I met rich accountants, I met rich real estate brokers, rich lawyers, some doctors. Never met a rich mason. You're always spinning your wheels. But the knowledge, you could use that to catalyst yourself into other things. Like I could build a house if I want. I could flip a house if I want. I could buy apartments. I know how to do the plumbing and the heating. You know, I know a little bit about law. I could go back into real estate. All that kind of stuff. But I never met a rich Mason. Now so far, you've just been hearing my side of the story, my side of the fence. I try to get some interviews, but any inspector that I asked in my area wouldn't give me an interview. But I did get one interview from a girl down in Florida, and she was a building inspector for fire. It's called Building Inspector Fire, and I asked her some hard questions. She just did commercial buildings in that city. So that's the only interview I really got. I'd love to interview the Bureau of Labor Industry on the whole thing. So that's it. So just for a litmus test, I hang these little sayings on my wall, biblical. I don't want to have feet that run to mischief. Two sides of every story. Sometimes I wonder if it's me, and you got to ask yourself that. So as far as that goes, I'm pretty much done. Now I'm going to tell you about what I expect to do with my channel. So that's mostly it. I don't take big jobs anymore. If I see something that will fit on the video, I'll do it. Something that I'm looking for. I want all my videos to be black and white. In other words, I looked at the job, this is how I approached it, this is the materials I used, this is how I finished it, and then a little commentary on the end. I don't want to get into like the social media stuff on that kind of channel. People say, oh, go to Patreon and all this. I don't think it's appropriate. So I want it as if someone looks at it 20 years from now, it's just as good as the day I did it. Also, I have playlists, you know, foundation playlist, or I went to the pyramids playlist, or I put windows in playlist, or I did block work or brickwork playlist. So everything's black and white. Everybody could find it and as it goes. That's my little award from YouTube for 100,000 subscribers. I have another channel, Travel Mechanics and Music, and on that channel I bought that motorhome, and I was going to do the whole country and then go to the Bahamas, you know, buy a sailboat and do the Bahamas, but my dad got sick, so I'm actually here. That's why my videos are still continuing. Mostly on that site it's just music and plumbing and mechanics and that, but someday I'm going to eventually do that. Also, people are going to ask me for the book that I wrote, so at the end of the video I'm just going to kind of flash the pages out so you get it for free. I have a website where you could get t-shirts if you wanted to buy tools. I also have Bible commentaries because like I said, I spent time in the Middle East. I really understand that stuff. And people are going to ask me about the stove. Yep, it's a real stove. Back in the day, the grandmothers and that would cook on it. Here's the bread warmer right there. This is where the ashes are. Where you rake it down, the ashes are beneath. The bread warmer, the damper. It's got a couple dampers, and the pot holders. So in my area, I can walk across the street and actually pick a ton of coal and come over here and light it. And I always said the first woman that picks me a ton of coal over there and bakes me a loaf of bread on this, I just might marry her. So that's it. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike Haduck, and I'll see you in the next video.